Hey folks, more on the reality. The reality. The stock market enjoyed a bear market rally that began in March '09, aided and abetted by hundreds of billions of bailout funds, non-stop 24/7 hype, and propaganda and massive Wall Street plunge protection team manipulation. But on April 26, that bear market rally rolled over, and through late May, the U.S. stock market had lost $1.46 trillion. With that primary psychological prop for the economy now falling apart, the recession, or depression, depending on how you look at it, is now again going to be regaining momentum to the downside. Bullish propaganda from the administration, Fed, Wall Street, and financial media notwithstanding. This is all happening concurrently with the financial meltdown of Europe, which commenced with the implosion in Iceland, more recently Greece, and which is now spreading to Spain, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, and perhaps even France. The sovereign debt of Europe, totaling $11.04 trillion, is in grave danger of causing a cascading avalanche of defaults. Most of the incredibly indebted nations, including the UK, are on the verge of bankruptcy. Such a snowballing of sovereign debt defaults would destroy the euro and the credibility of the entire European Union. Hence, it must be stopped at all costs, and hence the $1 trillion bailout in May. More will follow, much more. The reality. The $1 trillion bailout was strictly to prop up the big banks of Europe, who own most of the European debt. As in America, it was about bailing out the bankers. But that trillion was like throwing a bucket of water on Rome as it was burning in Nero's day. Except for the immediate and very short-term psychological impact on the public, the $1 trillion, $321 billion of which came from the IMF and $55 billion from the U.S., will do little to stanch the hemorrhaging of tens of trillions in European debt and hundreds of trillions in derivatives to which Europe is exposed. John Pugsley, chairman of the Sovereign Society, recently wrote, $1 trillion in new debt to keep the pigs afloat so the whole European system doesn't go under. It's another classic example of how the politician will try to borrow their way out of debt. The EU politicians apparently figured that if a $700 billion infusion of new debt by the United States government stopped the hemorrhage from the subprime crisis in 2008, $1 trillion should do it for Europe. It can't. U.S. politicians and bankers seem to know that they too could be sucked down in the undertow. The U.S., the largest single contributor to the IMF, agreed to the IMF contribution. In addition, Ben Bernanke reopened the central bank swap lines with the European Central Bank, meaning the Fed stands ready to step in when the EU IMF plan falters. Don't forget the $700 billion TARP package had to be backed up by the Federal Reserve purchases of over $1.2 trillion in junk bonds. The Eurozone is not even close to solving its problems. The only thing positive that can be said about the European financial nightmare is that it is not nearly as bad as America's. The U.S. debt situation is far worse than that of Greece's or most of the European pigs, and when it implodes in the U.S., much of the world, especially Europe, will plunge into the black abyss, i.e. global financial meltdown, and a Great Depression. As Jason Zieweg recently pointed out in the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. now has a heavier debt burden that a number of the profligate countries known as the pigs. According to the IMF, politicians in Portugal have borrowed a total equal to 85.9% of its GDP. Ireland owes 78.8%. Italy owes 118.6%. And Greece owes 124.1%. Spain is at 66.9%. At the end of the 2008 fiscal year, it was September 30th of 2008, total U.S. Treasury debt stood at $5.8 trillion. As of the end of 2009, it had jumped $2 trillion to $7.8 trillion. In the past 4 months, it added another $6 billion, advancing the government debt to 92.6% of the projected GDP for 2010. Since the GDP figures are inflated by money borrowed by government and spent, real GDP figures are overstated. U.S. GDP is significantly lower, and the debt GDP ratio is undoubtedly over 100%. Even more to think about. While the world markets are hoping the latest move in the shell game at the EU and IMF will solve the problem, I remain in the skeptic's corner. Worst of all, whenever you see such things as the United States will in reference to loaning money or guaranteeing debt, remember, it's you, the taxpayer, who will foot the bill. Hope you're feeling generous. Unfortunately, the problems caused by all this bad debt have not been solved. The stock, real estate, and derivatives markets have not yet vomited up all of their indigestible trash. Think trillions of dollars in bad assets that must still be liquidated. In the case of derivatives, hundreds of trillions in toxic assets. All of this suggests that the worst is yet to come. If a significant amount of your wealth is held in dollars, i.e. stocks, bonds, real estate, 401ks, whatnot, we strongly urge you to exchange them for things of value. They recommend gold and silver and whatnot. We're going to cut this one. We're getting close. It's going to be a little shorter than the last one, but it's just more of what's going on. It's the realities, folks. Right now, I've got on Craigslist a Gen Air Range. I picked it up a bit back. It's just been sitting. Well, it's time to get rid of it. Doesn't look like I'm going to be using it anytime soon. I'm renting a home. Time to liquidate. I'm getting rid of the stuff we don't need. Holding on to the bare essentials. Get out of debt. Oh. Never fear, another part's coming. Peace.